So we move to the second part, and we invite the people from local people from San Antonio to tell us their experience. Remember, this is a border state, so thank you. Oh, God.
Good afternoon. My name is Susan Staffier. I want to begin with an image from Malta. After 2 weeks adrift, 267 shipwrecked people finally reached the shores of a Mediterranean island. They were soaking wet, exhausted, and terrified. In their near brush with death, they had experienced their powerlessness against the forces of nature. But the people of Malta showed them unusual kindness. This isn't one of today's news stories. It happened to St. Paul, the Apostle. We too feel called to live these words from the Acts of the Apostles by showing unusual kindness towards people, going beyond our comfort zones. As Pope Francis says, to reach out to the peripheries. Our journey in San Antonio began in 2015 when our community became involved with the Interfaith Welcome Coalition and Catholic Charities. Not all of us speak Spanish, but we were aided by phone apps that translated instantly. Many of the people we met were young single mothers with little children. All were fleeing their homeland, usually in Central America, traveling thousands of miles, spending time in jail-like conditions once they reached our borders. Once released from the border center, they were transported to San Antonio, usually with nothing but the clothes on their back. Through the IWC, they received lodging for 1 or 2 nights until their sponsor, usually a family member in another part of the United States, could make arrangements for them to take a bus or fly to their final destination. Many of us also helped at the Guadalupe Community Center to prepare backpacks with essential items that were all donated by local parishes. The backpacks were given to families as they arrived at the bus station and the airport.
My name is Janie Carter. When we approached the immigrants, we would ask them if we could help them with their bus tickets or boarding pass. Some of them looked at us with fear in their eyes, thinking that we might be from immigration. We would share a little bit about ourselves to put them at ease. They recounted how they had been threatened by gangs and cartels and the horrors that they had endured in their country and during the 2,000-mile trip through Mexico. Sadly, many of the women and young girls had been raped along the way. Their stories were heart-wrenching. After earning their trust, we offered them our cell phones to contact their families here in the U.S. Most had left everything behind: their families, their homes, their car, and their businesses. It was a simple matter of survival. I remember one young mother, 26 years old, from El Salvador. She was left with her grandparents when she was a baby. Now, with 3 children of her own, she was on her way to California to see her parents and siblings for the first time. Others shared their experiences inside detention centers with their small children, enduring cold and sometimes lack of food and medicine. After spending several hours together, we said our goodbyes, we hugged them, and entrusted them to Jesus. If they had a bus or plane connection, we advised them to look for a Spanish-speaking person and ask for help. They said, "God sent you to us in our hour of need." But in the end, we realized that we had received more than we had given them. We had lived the scripture, "Whatever you did to the least of my brothers, you did it to me."
My name is Guadalupe Lopez. Both my parents, all my siblings, and I were born and raised in San Antonio. And I say this because as Hispanics in Texas, we are at times also considered as outsiders. Also, this fact gives some understanding what these refugees were living. In the past, I had been involved with a group in solidarity with Latin America assistance during the crisis in El Salvador, when the Maryknoll sisters and others were martyred. It was still very difficult to fathom the pain and humiliation a human being is capable of inflicting upon another. Still, I made the decision to put all my fears aside and together with others, extend our hand to the rejected, the poor, the suffering. This meant that I must approach each one of these neighbors with complete detachment of any personal agenda or interests. No further exploitation of their humanity. It meant to try to encounter them as Jesus with a young man. He looked at him and loved him. I remember discussing this with a child en route on their journey. Any lions, alligators, bears, eagles, snakes, he asked. How about grass, trees, roads, plants? After 2 hours and at the end, he appeared relaxed, content with all the information he had gathered, and he and his mom continued their journey north. Another mom with three young ones. My friend and I were very efficiently giving her the how and why in maneuvering the trip, tickets, schedules, lines, routes, and on. At a certain point, I asked her, ¿Habla español? Do you speak Spanish? And she answered, un poquito. I speak our dialect. At the end, we had to switch to part Spanish, part sign language. And she also found humor in our situation. So we were the first contact after the border experience and detention centers, and they seemed to have given a big sigh of relief.
Hello, my name is Ralph Staffier, and I will be sharing for another person in our group. We felt that it was Jesus asking us to care for him in these young families. One after the other commented, "We don't see this happening in our countries. Why do you help us?" There was no need for an answer. Among the migrants, we also assisted a few young adult men. Jose shared, "They were going to kill me because I didn't want to join the gangs. I received multiple threats and had to tell my mom that I was leaving. She understood and gave me a prayer card to Our Lady of the Mystical Rose. I had never heard of this devotion. Jose said, 'Do you believe in miracles?' He pulled out a worn-out piece of paper out of his pocket, and he showed it to me. It was a very beautiful prayer. And to my surprise, he said, 'Keep it. It's yours. You are the answer to my prayers.' Through my travel, I had been asking for someone to lend me a helping hand, and you showed up to assist me. I was floored. I didn't know what to say. I took a picture of the prayer and returned it to him with love and compassion. I told him to keep it. This way, both of us can continue praying for those who are yet to be released from detention."
Hello, I'm Mike Swarges. When assisting people at the airport, we decided to work as a team to always include one Spanish speaker. This also gave us the opportunity to experience Jesus' own presence among two or three, like he said in the gospel, so that it could be his presence who helped these families. Sometimes we had to split up to take families to different terminals, leaving an English speaker with a family who only spoke Spanish for several hours waiting for their flight. One morning, I was with two families at the terminal. By the time the second family got on the plane, I had been with them almost for 3 hours. I was unable to speak with the mother, but managed to play with the little girl and share some well-meaning gestures with the mom. I also offered to get them something to eat and drink. This was probably about 4:35 in the morning. Finally, it was time for them to get on the plane. As the mom and the little girl stood in line looking back at me, the mother leaned over and whispered something into the little girl's ear. Then the little girl immediately started running through the crowd straight up to me. I knelt down to greet her, and she gave me a big hug. Then she turned and ran back to get in line. And as they were almost to go down the gangplank, she looked back, waved at me, and the mother smiled from ear to ear. I felt as if I was saying goodbye to family, even if I knew I'd never see them again. So all of us had entered into this endeavor with a desire to help people who couldn't give back to us. But we found that we received so much more, also in witnessing the many ways that love is contagious. Thank you.
So now that you've, sorry? We do? No. So now that you've had some chance to listen to some of this, and we can't possibly cover everything. I mean, we could talk about the law, we could talk about statistics, we could talk about so many things, but you all bring a lot of experience to this too. So on your tables is one sheet of paper turned over in the middle, and we took the 4 verbs that the Pope has given us for and develop some questions around those. There's 3 questions, and so each table will just have one of those verbs, and you'll have 3 questions. And if you don't have one, Carlos has some more, just in case, but you should all have one. And so we're going to give you the next, 20, 30 minutes to talk about those in your table, and just, sorry? Yeah. And just, share among yourselves. And then when we come back, we'll process a little bit together. So enjoy your discussion.
The questions are meant to incite some of the difficulties also, so deal with those things. So for the next 20 minutes, let's work on those.